In the ancient tapestry of human history, amidst the rise and fall of empires, one civilization stands as an enigmatic beacon of maritime prowess and cultural diffusion, the Phoenicians. Renowned as the masters of the seas, architects of celestial knowledge, and guardians of esoteric wisdom, their influence rippled across continents, shaping the destinies of nations from Egypt to Ireland and beyond. Unveiling the Phoenicians, masters of ancient seas and global influence. The Phoenicians were one of the greatest maritime races in the history of the world. They were masters of the oceans and the world's most proficient architects, shipwrights, woodworkers, traders, and astronomers. Archaeologists have discovered numerous Phoenician shipwrecks across the Mediterranean, such as the famous shipwrecks off the coast of Israel at sites like Dor and Atlit. These wrecks demonstrate their advanced shipbuilding techniques and extensive maritime trade networks. Phoenician colonies like Carthage in North Africa and Gadir, modern-day Cadiz, in Spain, indicate their extensive trade networks and strategic maritime presence. Archaeological excavations at these sites and others across the Mediterranean have uncovered evidence of Phoenician trade in goods such as pottery, glassware, metals like bronze and tin, and luxury items. There was not a civilization in ancient Europe and Asia that did not owe their existence to the influence of the Phoenicians. This was especially the case with the Egyptians. The civilizations of pre-dynastic Egypt were founded by these mysterious people of unknown origin. The first dynasty of Egypt was made up of Phoenician kings, and the languages of the two countries are strikingly similar. The language of the Phoenicians was not, as most scholars do not want to believe and advocate, a dialect of Egyptian. On the contrary, the Egyptian language was derived from Phoenician. An objective study of the evidence shows that Aramaic, Hebrew, Arabic, Syriac, and Armenian, as well as many other ancient languages, were enriched by the infusion of Phoenician religious and cultural elements. The fact concerning the distortion of truth concerning Phoenician language and culture has been fully explained by Professor L.A. Waddell. Professor Waddell was one of the first men to accurately translate many seals and scripts of the ancient world, particularly those of the Phoenicians, Babylonians, and Sumerians, some Aryans. His exemplary and incontestable discoveries have been deliberately suppressed by those obfuscators whose patrons have a great deal to lose should the facts concerning our world's true history ever be widely known. Unlike Professor Waddell, there are those of us who do not believe the Phoenicians were originally an Eastern European people who took their cultural elements westward to Britain during the various prolonged trading and mining missions. The new evidence slowly coming to light regarding pre-Diluvian civilizations in the West and concerning lost land bridges strengthens our strong belief in the Western origins of the Phoenician people. From the British Isles, these masters of the high seas, who were also known as the Arcadians or Bear Race, traveled to the Americas, taking with them, as the great researcher Barry Fell proved, their Gaelic tongue that is still spoken by the Algonquin Indians of Canada and North America. And from their homeland beyond the Pillars of Hercules, they also traveled eastward, taking their cultural idioms to those Oriental lands. There were few places on the face of the earth where Phoenician ships had not docked. This book is also offered as a pioneer contribution towards a true universal history of man, from the earliest civilized period founded on concrete facts as contrasted with current dogmatic theories appealing to tradition and prejudice, and often it is to be feared, designed in the interest of those who profit by the maintenance of error. Professor L.A. Waddell, The Makers of Civilization. Phoenicians, guardians of ancient wisdom and transmitters of civilization. In our estimation, there can be little doubt that the Phoenicians originated in Britain. We wholeheartedly agree with Professor Waddell, who first declared in the 1920s that the Phoenicians were definitely related tribally and ethically to the Sumerian, Amorites, Hittites, and perhaps the Minoans of Crete. Since, as Ralph Ellis has shown, the Minoans of Crete were closely connected to the Hyksos pharaohs of Egypt, it is logical to assume the Phoenicians, Minoans, and Hyksos were associated in some way culturally, racially, or more likely economically. In any case, there can be little doubt given the philosophical evidence that the Phoenicians and Sumerians were one and the same people. However, unlike Professor Waddell, we do not believe the original homeland of the Phoenicians and Sumerians to have been either Cappadocia in modern Turkey or the Danube Valley. We believe it had to have been Britain. It is therefore through the travels of the Phoenicians that the world's parent language dispersed. Additionally, from the Phoenicians came the first unadulterated stellar and solar region and first organized pantheons, as well as other techniques of science, architecture, music, and art. According to the traditions of the Phoenicians, the gardens of the Hesperides were in the remote west, Murray's Manual of Mythology. Although Mediterranean and Asian cultures went on to develop, refine, and also distort the cultural elements they inherited from the Western elders, they were not the original manufacturers of them. The seeds of Eastern European and Asian civilizations were transmitted not from Scythia, as most Celtic scholars concede, but from much farther west from the greatly endowed, yes, Atlantean inhabitants of the furthest west Sunset Land, who fashioned by their art the colossal western temples still to be seen at Stonehenge, Newgrange, Carrowkeel, Avebury, and Karnak. Newgrange is the oldest scientific instrument in the world still functioning. It predates Stonehenge and the pyramids and stands as one of the world's most ancient monuments. It is quite likely it will still be functioning when our own scientific instruments have turned to dust. Martin Brennan, Lecture on Newgrange Tumulus. Phoenicians, keepers of ancient mysteries and global connections. In light of this, we do not accept as accurate the official dates given for the rise of the Phoenicians, a few hundred years BC. We agree with Comans Beaumont and L.A. Waddell that their ancestry went much further back in time. What we do know is that the term Phoenician is thought to have derived from one of three main sources. The word referred to the purple dye extracted from the shellfish by the Phoenicians, who held the monopoly on its production. This dye was preferred by the pharaohs of Egypt and was primarily a color of royalty. Contemporary studies and scholarly articles in archaeology, ancient history, and chemistry confirm the historical production and trade of Tyrian purple, the purple dye by the Phoenicians. Excavations at Phoenician sites, particularly at Tyre and Sidon, have uncovered evidence of production facilities for Tyrian purple. This includes vats for dye extraction and amphorae used to transport the dye. These studies often discuss its economic importance and cultural significance in the ancient Mediterranean world. Then, we find the word connected to the mythical bird known as the phoenix and to the sacred tree of this strange creature, namely the date palm. The image of the date palm frond that turns up in the story of Jesus was commonly to be found above the doorways and windows of temples, shrines, and sacred colleges. Cities such as Tanis, which author Ralph Ellis believes was the actual site of the biblical Jerusalem, were richly adorned with majestic palm columns and decorative stone palm frond motifs. Amid the frond motif was usually the solar disk, since the palm frond and the tree were sacred to the sun god Amun-Ra. We believe that the cult of Amun-Ra had its origins in Ireland. The Phoenicians, therefore, had a strong connection to one of the most ancient and important gods of the sun. The phoenix symbolized spiritual resurrection and zodiacal cycles. Like the Irish druids and Egyptian magi, the Phoenicians were mystical adepts. They produced great navigators, architects, and scientists, and also great scholars, poets, and seers. Their eastern cities were incomparably impressive. Officially, they are known to have frequently traveled to Britain, where they mined for ores such as copper and tin. The world's oldest highway is the ocean. Frederick Haberman, Tracing Our Ancestors. The Egyptians referred to the Druids as the people of the sea, Sirona Night, Celtic traditions. In primitive centuries, when ancient maritime races thus held supremacy in the Mediterranean Sea, voyages were undoubtedly made far into the Atlantic Ocean. The Phoenicians, who of all the nations settled on its shores lay among the remotest from the outlying ocean, habitually traded with settlements on the Atlantic. They colonized the western shores of the Mediterranean at a remote period, occupied numerous favorable trading posts on the bays and headbands of the Euxine, as well as of Sicily and others of the larger islands, passing beyond the straits, effected settlements along the coasts of Europe and Africa. According to Strabo, they had factories beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the period immediately succeeding the Trojan War, an era which yearly becomes for us less mythical and to which may be assigned the great development of the commercial prosperity of Tyre. Sir Daniel Wilson, The Lost Atlantis and Other Ethnographic Studies, 1892. We concur with Professor Waddell's conjecture that the Phoenicians were not members of the Semitic racial family. The archaeological evidence clearly shows that they were like the Irish, ethnically and racially Gothic, Nordic, Indo-European, and Caucasian, or as Professor Waddell preferred, Aryan. Thus, the Phoenicians with their ships laden with secrets and sails billowing with tales of old fade once more into the mists of time, a reminder that history's greatest narratives often lie in the depths waiting to be discovered anew.